Hi there, scholars. So I feel like I would be doing you a disservice if I did not at least mention some historical significance and kind of explain a little bit behind today's holiday, which is called Juneteenth. So this has been a celebration that has been in effect since 1865, and it began on June 19th. And I'm going to give you a little bit of history behind it, but this actually comes from my home state of Texas, where I was raised. So in Texas, we've always celebrated this. I remember being very young and seeing celebrations happening the week leading up to Juneteenth, and of course on that holiday. And then there were always parades, there was always cookouts, there was always like something special going on in my hometown of Paris, Texas. So, which is very segregated, by the way, if you look it up. But this is a holiday that I grew up with. It's not a holiday that everyone else grew up with because it didn't become a federal holiday until the Biden administration. So just to give you a little bit of context, let me click on the next picture here. These are some of the early celebrations. This was taken in 1920, so over 100 years ago. You can see African Americans celebrating in Richmond, Virginia. This is a little bit more modern. This was like, I believe, 70s or 80s when this one up here was done, and then this one down here, this is a more recent one. But you can see it's like any other small town parade, if you will. There's floats. Sometimes they're very elaborate. Sometimes, there's bands that walk. There's people that, where I'm from in Texas, there's people that, like, you have your black cowboys that will ride their horses, bring their cows to the parades. And so this is a big thing to the Black community. But let's talk about its origins. So this guy right here, this is Union Major General Gordon Granger. And he arrived in Galveston, Texas, which is on the coast of Texas. If you don't know, it's a coastal, like in the Gulf of Mexico city. But he arrives June 19th of 1865 and informing African Americans there that were slaves, he was like, in Texas, you're free. So although you're like, well, I thought the Emancipation Proclamation freed them. No, the Emancipation Proclamation was a piece of paper that stated you're free if you're living in areas that are still under rebellion. So it didn't free any of the slaves in the border states. It didn't free any slaves that were still in unoccupied areas. It really didn't free anyone. It doesn't come to fruition until the Union wins the war, and then you have people like Granger going into the Deep South and announcing, hey, you guys are free. And so when this announcement is made, it starts in Texas, and Texas is a very significant place because a lot of Confederates were actually moving their slaves to Texas because it was so far west, and they thought, this will kind of be our last stand. So enslaved people remained in bondage, even after the Emancipation was released in 1863. But freedom only became enforceable when the Confederacy officially collapsed in 1865 with the ending of the Civil War. So this general, he gives out General Order Number 3, and it declared the people of Texas are informed that all slaves are free. It also stated that there would be absolute equality of personal rights and rights of property between formerly enslaved people and former enslavers. However, it did encourage free people to remain where you are and just begin working for a wage. And that really reflected the government's desire for like the stability during Reconstruction. In my History 103 students, you will soon find out, if you don't know this already, that's just a way to keep African Americans in a state of poverty. And we have this thing called sharecropping. Totally had a blank there for a minute. So did Juneteenth end slavery everywhere when this general came and announced it? No, there were still a lot of people that were in like pockets of the Deep South that were hiding from their slaves that the war was over and that they were free. It took over a year after the end of the war for some enslaved people to know that, hey, you're actually free. Like they had to go into these areas and like really enforce it. So beginning in 1866, that's when we have a lot of Texans, formerly enslaved Texans, that's when they began celebrating Juneteenth the next year, right? Because it commemorates that 1 year of the general showing up. So it's really cool. And then in 1997, I believe, is when this gentleman, his name is Ben Haith, he actually designed the official Juneteenth flag. So let's look at that really quickly. Sorry, there we go. So this is the official Juneteenth flag. And what's really cool about this, there's a lot of symbolism to this flag. So the colors of this one, the red, white, and blue intentionally mirror the American flag, and it's also symbolizing that enslaved people and their descendants are American citizens. This is really important when you start looking at the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments that define citizenship, that end slavery, and that kind of set the stage for future generations to follow. Like, who do we count as citizens? Who do we let vote? That kind of thing. So it's really important to establish and make that connection that they are Americans. The central white star, it also has a dual meaning. So if you don't know about Texas, Texas is known as the Lone Star State because we have one star on our flag. So that's where that one comes from. It represents Texas, the Lone Star State, but also signifies the freedom and the new beginnings of Black Americans across all 50 states. And then this star burst on the outside, this represents new beginning and a new horizon for African Americans. And then this arc here, that is that divides the red and the blue, represents that new horizon, opportunities, and continued progress for the future. You'll also see a lot of times the Pan-African flag, which is this one, the red, black, and green. So their meanings are a little bit different. The Pan-African flag represents like global connection to the African diaspora, which means like African descendants placed all over the world and kind of that culture coming from Africa. While the Juneteenth flag really honors specific history of emancipation in the US, and a lot of times you'll see yellow infiltrated into our Juneteenth. But a lot of times you'll see these two flags being flown on Juneteenth celebrations. And this one's kind of a new-ish one. You can get this one on Amazon. But these are the three different types of flags that you'll see flown during Juneteenth celebrations this week. So it's a really cool history. It's a really cool thing that happened. Like I said, it's been celebrated in Texas since 1866, the first year commemorating when Granger showed up and announced, hey, slavery's over. And then after that, I believe it was in 2021, and someone can fact check me, but in 2021 when the Biden administration made it a federal holiday. And so you'll find businesses closed today, like Phoenix College is closed to commemorate the Juneteenth holiday. So just a little bit of background for you, probably way more than you wanted to know, but now you know.